All right, here we go. Are we ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone, to all of you here and all of you streaming online. Welcome to the Forum at All Souls, coming to you from All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm Joe Robertson, a member of this church and a member of the Forum Committee, supporting this forum that for 80 years has been providing our community a platform to explore and discuss the most compelling issues of the day. Today we welcome SuEllen Fried as we continue our spotlight on our community's struggle and our nation's struggle with a mental health crisis among our youth. SuEllen is a nationally recognized bullying prevention activist, educator, and author. Her books, her work in schools, her service on presidential task forces, and the creation of organizations like BullySafeUSA have surely saved lives. So, SuEllen, welcome to the forum.
Is there any way I could stand here so I could see the people? Can I move this a little bit? Oh, this is so much better. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm going to talk to you this morning about the transformative power of pain. This morning, trying to get here, I was in enormous emotional pain. Everywhere I went, there was a police car and a guardrail, and I couldn't get here. And I kept thinking, what am I going to do? Every street I turned on, I couldn't turn on. And one of the things, the most important thing I think I've learned about pain, the value of pain, is that when you get in so much discomfort, something goes on inside of you and comes through for you. And for me this morning, it was determination. If I had to go to Cleaver Boulevard to get back here to you, I was determined to do it. I wanted to see you. I wanted to have a dialogue with you. So I have come to have great appreciation for pain, and I'm going to tell you how it first started. When I was a little girl, I took dancing lessons. And then as I got older and bigger, I decided I wanted to be a star on Broadway. And so I danced and I danced and I danced. And I was getting ready to go with a dear friend of mine to head for New York. I had danced in the Muni Opera for 3 summers. So I thought, okay, Broadway, here I come. And I came to Kansas City because a friend of mine invited me to come see the last performance of Starlight Theater in its first season. Muni closed Sunday night, Starlight stayed open Monday night. Her husband had been drafted, and she was from St. Louis with me, and she came to stay with her in-laws, and she said, come to Kansas City, and I'll fix you up with some dates, and you'll get to see Starlight Theater. I had never been on an airplane. I was 17 years old. Our family always traveled by train or car. I went out and bought a gorgeous new outfit, because when you went on an airplane in those days, you got very dressed up. I'll never forget, I wore a black and white outfit, black pants with a stunning black and white top. I had on white gloves. I wore a black patent purse and black patent shoes, and I just couldn't believe what was happening to me. So I came and she fixed me up with some different men, and one of them turned out to be the love of my life. And so he had made a promise to me that before we got married, I would go to New York for 6 months just to get it out of my system and never spend the rest of my life thinking, if only. Harvey was going to ask them for his hand in marriage, my hand, somebody's hand. I was going to get married. And so he explained to them that we had talked about this. I was going to go to New York for 6 months and get it out of my system, and then I'd come home and we'd have a wedding. And my mother turned to him and she said, "You are a damn fool if you let this woman go to New York." My mother, who adored me, I adored her. How could she do this to me? She said, what if at 5.5 months, she goes to an audition and she gets a small part? You can't operate that way in life. You can't do that to other people. You make a commitment, you honor a commitment. I was devastated. But I thought maybe Harvey would disregard what my mother said, but he did not. He said, you have to choose. I'm telling you all this because this is going to lead, I'm telling you this is going to lead to pain. So I got married. I still wanted to figure out how I was going to dance in Kansas City, and I got pregnant on my honeymoon. I was going to go to New York with this little girl from Alton, Illinois, who danced in the Muni with me. She had kind of like a little southern drawl. She had porcelain skin. She had blonde curls, big blue eyes, and she was the pet of everyone. Her name was Barbara, and everybody called her Barbie. And so I had to tell Barbie that I wasn't going to go to New York with her, and she went on. So now here I am in Kansas City, being a mother, which wasn't on my to-do list, and I got a call from a woman who was the director of volunteer services at Osawatomie State Hospital. And she said, I'm the director of volunteer services, and whenever anybody who is here as a patient and they make a request, I feel an obligation to honor whatever it is they want. And there's a woman here who wants to learn how to do the cha-cha. And somebody gave me your name because you teach an exercise class for women. And she said, I wonder if you'd be willing to come to Osawatomie and talk to me about this. I got in my car and I started driving to Osawatomie State Hospital with fear and terror in my heart because I did not know how to do the cha-cha. There is a sign on my refrigerator door that is the essence of my life. It says, life begins when you get out of your comfort zone. I was going way out of my comfort zone. But when I got there, I had to start out by apologizing and telling Rosalie Balker that I did not know how to do the cha-cha. She said, "What can you do?" I said, "I can do ballet, I can do tap, I can do modern." She said, "Come back in 2 weeks and we'll bring some patients over for you." So I went home and I designed the most fantastic dance session. Mikhail Baryshnikov could not have done what I was going to do for these people. And they brought into this new gym that they had just built at the State Hospital about 75 women who were dressed in, did anybody ever see the movie Snake Pit? Anybody in here? We go back a long, long time. And they wore these dresses made out of flour sacks. And so I'm standing in front of about 75 women. In my wildest dream, I had no idea. I mean, where was my brain? So all I could do is we learned the 5 positions, and we learned how to spread our arms, and we learned how to reach over. And I was perspiring so hard because I thought, oh my God, what? And at the end of the session, Rosalie Balker ran up to me and she said, "SuEllen, that is the most fantastic thing I have ever seen. I hope you're going to come back here for a long time because this has been amazing." I said, "Rosalie, there is nothing amazing about what I did." She said, "Well, let me tell you why it is. You did not treat them like psychiatric patients. You treated them like they were people learning how to dance." I was a volunteer at Osawatomie for 17 years. And I ended up becoming a director of an off-Broadway show. I would recruit people, and they would write a script, and I would turn it into a musical. And I learned to have such respect for people who were in emotional pain. They were so raw. They were so real. It seemed like I had been spending my life kind of just going through all the social graces, being a mother. These were people who were trying to find what was going on inside of them that had brought them to this place. And their search, their journey, was so eye-opening for me. And their pain became such an important part of my life journey. And so I became very involved in the Mental Health Association because of my involvement with the people at Osawatomie. And I used to go here, Dr. Carl Menninger. Does that name mean anything to anybody in this room? The Menninger Institute in Topeka, Kansas, was the most outstanding psychiatric resource in the country. It was extraordinary, and there were 2 brothers who had started it because their father, who was a physician, began to feel that he was treating people with medication, but it wasn't helping. He came up with the brilliant idea of having them plant a garden. He felt that if they could take a little seed and nurture it and take care of it, and it would bloom and it would blossom, they could send a message to their inner self. that you are capable of growing and changing and developing and becoming. What a gift from Dr. Charles to his two brothers to create a place. This was one of the most interesting things about psychiatry. There were celebrities from Hollywood and Broadway who were dealing with mental illness, and they didn't want anybody to know about it. So they came to the Menninger Institute in Topeka, Kansas, because they knew nobody would ever find them there, and they could get treatment in anonymity. So I used to go hear him speak all the time, and I'll never forget a speech that he gave. He said, if parents neglect or abuse their children, they are going to be in great pain. Those children, as they become adults, are going to deal with that pain because they didn't get the love they needed in the beginning. He said some people, some children will turn that pain inward, and they will end up in our psychiatric hospitals. Other people will turn that pain outward, and they will end up in our prisons. Little did I know. So I loved my work at Osawatomie, but I was ready to move on after becoming the head of the Mental Health Association, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I got a call from someone, a woman, who had 2 adopted children, and she read a book called The Battered Child by 2 child psychiatrists. And when she finished reading that book, she thought, what would have happened to my 2 children if I hadn't adopted them? And so she decided to start a national child abuse organization. And her father had created a foundation, and he knew Dr. Carl Menninger. And so when Donna wanted to give $500,000 to a child abuse organization, there was none. So she said, I'm going to have to start one. So she called together some experts, and they said, whatever you do, do not set up an office in some place and think that you're going to have an office with staff and Prevent Child Abuse America. You are going to have chapters in every state in the country. Child abuse happens in the communities, in the towns, in the cities, in the homes, in the families. You can't change all that behavior from an office in Chicago. And because of Mr. Stone's relationship with Dr. Carl, they chose Kansas to be the first state. And because Dr. Carl knew me and something happened, whatever. Anyway, she called me and said, would you please start a chapter for the prevention of child abuse? I said, I don't know anything about child abuse. This was in the early 70s. She said, nobody does. Do the best you can, and we'll learn from your mistakes or successes if you should have any. Well, I have this little sign on my refrigerator door. I had to say yes. So I said yes, and then I thought, where am I going to get members? Where am I going to get a constituency? It's not like if somebody has, I was just watching Michael Fox on CBS this morning, and here is a man with Parkinson's. And it was an amazing interview to talk about. But here he was dealing with Parkinson's and trying to continue a career in theater and so forth and so on. So I just was struggling to figure out how I was going to get members. And because when I was president of the Mental Health Association, and I'd heard what Dr. Carl said, I thought, we should have a committee and go around the state and talk to people in prisons. So my name was on a mailing list. And the president of the Lifers Club in Lansing, Kansas, created a little interview. He believed that there was a correlation between having been abused and being incarcerated. So he had all the people go back to their cell blocks and interview everybody and bring back the information. And Terry analyzed it. And of course, his hypothesis was absolutely true. So many of the people in our prisons have been abused as children. So he wrote up all this information in the Lifers Club newsletter, and it came to my house because my name was on a mailing list. And he closed the information that he had gathered with these words. He said, if you brutalize your child, don't be surprised if that child grows up to become a killer. If you allow your neighbor to brutalize his children, don't wail and gnash your teeth when those children grow up and kill yours. So now I had a different message, because people who were wonderful to their children weren't going to buy a membership, and people who were abusing their children weren't going to buy a membership. But when I could make that statement, everybody could understand we all have to care what happens to every single infant. So I wrote to Terry McLean and I said, I would like to have permission to use your statement. I need it for something I want to do. He said, absolutely, on one condition. I said, what is that? He said, you have to come to a meeting of the Lifers Club. And that began a journey that I have been on for 40 years. I go to Lansing Prison every Wednesday night. And the program, I won't even go into all that. I'm only trying to bring to your awareness of why I have credibility as somebody to talk to you about pain. Because I spent 17 years in a psychiatric hospital with people dealing with psychiatric issues. And I've spent 40 years in prisons with people who are dealing with being incarcerated. I have been in the presence of an enormous amount of pain. And what I have learned from that is, first of all, everybody wishes that love was a universal experience. Wouldn't that be wonderful if the whole world was just filled with the yearning, the desire to love one another, to learn to love ourselves, to learn to love, love, love. But people who didn't get that love when they were infants go through life not knowing what love feels like, how to give it or how to receive it. But pain is the only universal experience. There are so many things that separate us for so many reasons. But I remember a morning when I woke up and I had tested myself and found that I had a case of COVID. And very shortly after that, it came to me that at this moment in time, I am connected to every single human being on the face of this planet. Because either you've had COVID, or you are having COVID, or you're worried about getting COVID. Every single human being in any country who speaks any language, who grew up in an entirely different way than I did, I have something in common with them. It was comforting to me to know that I was connected to everybody in the universe. The second value that I've learned about pain is that sometimes we know that we're doing something in our lives that isn't good. And we know we have to change, but change is kind of terrifying. And so often, if something is familiar to us, even if it's destructive, the familiar is more comforting than the thought of doing something entirely different. I have met so many people in prison who were dealing with addictions. And they kept on. They knew that they should give it up. They knew that the addiction was causing their lives to be in havoc, that it was causing pain for their family members, for their parents, for their children. But you got through the 24 hours yesterday. You know you can get through the same 24 hours tomorrow if you decide to give up something that is so much a part of your life. And you have no idea what that's going to be for you. When the pain gets so enormous, you're willing to work on giving up an addiction. That is the value of pain. When you finally reach the point where you have to make a change, even though it's terrifying. I think the third value of pain is that it gives you empathy. I read something, it was so long ago, I wish I had saved it, but some researcher had come to the conclusion that babies in a nursery, there are moments when they're all quiet, and one baby will start crying, and other babies will start crying. And the researchers, based on whatever techniques they use, decided that the other babies had empathy for the baby that was crying. We all have the capacity for empathy. And that's what led me to my work in bullying. Because when my daughter was in college, she went to college out of state, but she would come home in the summertime and she would work at KU Medical Center in the pediatric oncology unit. And one of those summers, she met a little girl by the name of Kimberly Weisel, who was 10 years old. Kimberly had gotten cancer when she was 7. And she had chemotherapy, and she went into remission, and her life was wonderful again. But when she was 10, the cancer came back very strong. And the doctor said, Kim, we're going to have to put you in the hospital, and you're going to have to spend the entire summer getting massive doses of chemo under close supervision. Paula and Kim connected. They fell in love with each other. And Paula looked forward to going to the hospital every day because she knew she and Kim were going to have time and space together. the end of August, the doctors contacted the family and Kim, and that news was shared with Paula, that the chemo hadn't worked, and Kim was not going to survive. Paula came home and she said, "Mom, can we please invite Kim and her mom to come over to our house for lunch? I'm going back to college. Kim's going into the 5th grade. We don't know if we will ever see each other again. I would love for us to have a special kind of time together." I said, "I would love to. I want to meet this precious girl." Kim and her mom came over to our house for lunch, and we're sitting there chatting, and my daughter, who was on her way to becoming a psychologist, turned to Kim, and she said, "Kim, are you looking forward to going back to school?" And Kim said, "I wish it would start tomorrow. I have not seen a single friend for 3 months. I cannot wait for school to start." And then Paula, on her way to being a psychologist, said, "Kim, do you have any concerns about going back to school?" And you'll never believe what Kim said. She said, "Recess." I said, "Recess? Kim, with everything that you're trying to deal with, how can recess be a problem?" She said, "Well, when I had cancer before, when I was younger, I wore a wig because I was getting chemotherapy. And there were some kids at recess that thought it was fun to pull my wig off of my head. And then they would make a circle, and they would point, and they would laugh, and they would make fun of me because I was bald." My daughter Paula and I never recovered from that conversation. Paula had 3 small children. Her life was very consumed. But I started going to schools and asking principals if they would please let me come in and talk about bullying. And everybody said, "Bullying? Everybody goes through bullying. It makes you tough. It builds character. It's just a part of life. You got to learn to take it and grow up and get on with it." And I told them the Kim story, and every principal let me come into the school and talk about bullying. I have heard so much pain. Paula and I ultimately wrote a book together and dedicated it to the memory of Kimberly Weisel. It took us 3 years to get the book published because nobody believed that bullying was worth reading or writing about. It's just a part of life, no big deal. It took us 3 years. Our book came out in 1996. Columbine happened in 1999. 3 years later, with the tragic shooting at Columbine High School, the world discovered bullying. And then research was being done, and so Paula and I had to write another book. And anyway, life begins when you get out of your comfort zone. So I remember two other things that I want to share with you that I learned from Dr. Carl Menninger. The first one definitely relates to empathy. In one of his books, he starts out by telling the story about a group of fish that are swimming in a pond. And one fish in the pond is upside down and its tail is flapping. And the fish think that is the weirdest thing they have ever seen, and they swim away as fast as they can. And Dr. Carl goes on to say, what those fish didn't know is that the reason that fish is upside down and its tail is flapping is because it has a hook in its mouth. It's doing the very best it can, considering the circumstances that it's in. And then he went on to say, every day of your life, you are going to come in contact with people who have invisible hooks that you can't see. Instead of being repulsed by them, why not consider that they might be dealing with an invisible hook that you can't see and you won't know about, but respecting the fact they're doing the best they can, considering the situation that they're in. So, this journey that I have taken has given me such, one of the prisoners who was incarcerated one day was trying to explain to a visitor who was, I bring visitors a lot to the prison, what happens, and he said, it's really hard to describe. All I can tell you is what we do together in here is raw, real, and relevant. What greater message could we get than from people who are willing to be raw, real, and relevant with each other, heal each other, than to look at the entire world as opportunity for us to have empathy and to learn and to grow and to become. So I hope at this point you have some stories to share, a comment to make, a question to ask. I would love for us to engage in a conversation about the value of pain. And there's a microphone.
Yeah, we're going to take a break. Yes, then we'll get to questions.
Okay.
Thank you, SuEllen. Yes, thank you, SuEllen. We've been listening to SuEllen Fried, and bullying prevention activist and author. Now, before we get to your audience questions, we're going to take a quick moment here for a message from the Friends of the Forum. You and Carolyn? And if we're going to hear from Carolyn McDonald, and as she's coming up, I also take this opportunity to tell you that we are going to continue our spotlight on suicide prevention next Sunday, first here at the Forum, with Jane Clementi of the Tyler Clementi Foundation. She will be in town to be with us as the All Souls Choir and guest musicians perform the Tyler Suite, a powerful cantata on the life of her son, Tyler, who died by suicide after being bullied. Performances are Sunday morning, May 7, and Monday evening, May 8. And you can learn more at allsoulskc.org. And also remind you, when we get to the questions and answer period, you're going to just come up here, please ask your question at the microphone, and please avoid statements when asking your question. And one question per person, please, until everyone has had a chance. And for those of you streaming on YouTube, you can write questions in the chat, and we will monitor them, and we'll try to get them asked as time allows. And we're going to have Carolyn here who has a message for everybody.
We know some of the information here and talk is about pain, And I've had a whole lot of experience with that in recent years because I've been in some terrible accidents. I always like to see books. And so I went to the library and said, what books do we have that have your name on them?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I have something to share with you when it's my turn again.
Okay, so here's one that says, Baggishing bullying behavior. And here's another one that says, let's see, bullies and victims, helping your child through the schoolyard battlefield. And in each, we have SuEllen as one of the authors there. And so maybe we can hear her later on tell some more about what led to her starting her books. But that's the way that I often get information, is I went to the library and I looked up SuEllen's name and said, what books did she write? And so, unfortunately, the Plaza Library where I went didn't have any. But they said, aha, we can order them from one of the other libraries in town and come by in a couple days and pick them up. So I started to read them, and I think these are things that, in addition to hearing her speak, that we're going to want to read the books. Now, one of the things that we do at every service and forum is later on we'll have a collection. And the collection is money that goes to support the church. Are you going to be doing that now? Oh, it's already done. We'll have a chance to do it again then maybe. But generally, when people come and speak at the forum, they're volunteers. We've called them from somewhere in the community, and they come, and the money that's collected goes toward the church budget because the church helps provide us with space and everything. However, sometimes there are special events, and we want to have some more funds. And so back a few years ago, one of our church members wrote up a trust called Friends of the Forum, and funds that go to Friends of the Forum are used to help provide for special events, speakers that may come from elsewhere. We may want to have some additional activities. And so one of the times when the funds that are collected go to something, the funds that are collected during activities here are going to go through Friends of the Forum, which then helps provide for special kinds of events that we have. But I want to talk just a little bit about bullies. I think...
Could we shorten this up because we're going to have limited time today. We're going to have to get out of the church right at 10:30. So anything you can do to abbreviate that would be helpful.
Okay, well then we can talk about things with bullies later, but we'll hear a lot about them. And I would just like to mention again that among the support of the special program we're having now is the Friends of the Forum Trust. We've also had a lot of work from a couple of people in the church. We've had Anthony, who's our music director, be very involved with things, and we're going to have some music that are part of things, and we have various people on the Forum Committee and connected with the Forum Trust that are going to be very involved with things. So if anybody wants to talk some more about this, I'll be happy to talk about them. And you might go to the library. Unfortunately, I have the only ones that are available to check out now, but I will be returning the books, and you can go and get even more information from them. But it's especially good to hear someone talk in person, and her badge says, "The power of kindness." I think that's a very good message to us.
All right. Thank you very much, Carolyn. Okay, and all right, SuEllen, back to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I have a question, young lady.
Yes.
David Brooks on Friday had an article or editorial about actually the situation we are in this country where one group of people is more Ayn Rand-like in saying that the powerful people should be powerful and aggressive, and that the meek shall suffer the consequences. And I think that defines our situation fairly well in America, but it also defines essentially what you're concerned about. Would you please comment on how we could essentially try to negate that kind of message?
I'm going to try to answer that. I think that I was able to witness something that happened this last week. American Public Square. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that organization. They put on major programs with controversial issues, and they have 3 people from each side, and they each talk and share information, and there's a fact checker, so you can't make a statement that is not fact checked. They brought together a group of students from 6 different schools. Instead of having all the adults plan a meeting, they had the kids. They said, no, you have to choose a topic. They chose abortion. The adults had been meeting for 9 years, bringing controversial issues to the community to be discussed, and they didn't want to touch abortion. They said, it's too controversial. We can't handle it. The kids came up with 3 people on each side. Chris Kobach was on the panel. You can't believe the variety of people in that audience. They were told from the very beginning, do not ever applaud, do not ever make a sound, listen. And this is my only answer to you, is that we have to be able to listen to somebody else's pain. Because when people carry that pain around with them with no release, no support, the rage keeps building up inside of them. And I think that we have to, one assignment we were given, if you're a member of American Public Square, is you had to call a person who didn't vote the same way you did, and you had to have a conversation with them. And I have another whole story about how that happened, but that's the only thing I can say, is we have to be willing to listen to people who are in pain, and instead of discarding them and rejecting them, we have to use our empathy to honor people and give them a chance to share what they're feeling and feel like they're being heard. I don't know if that is helpful to you at all or not.
What are schools doing now to help prevent bullying?
They are very aware. I mean, look at all the school shootings. If they didn't want to be aware, they can no longer ignore it. But it is so hard to find in advance these random shooters and prevent them from coming to school and shooting. Our society is in agony. Talk about pain. Our society is in pain. But if we can try to listen and hear things that we don't want to hear and we don't want to listen to, but we give somebody who has a different opinion some respect, maybe the rage won't become so tragic. Thank you for asking that question. I think schools are on edge trying to figure out what to do about bullying, because a lot of the shooters have been bullied. so we can't just ignore it. Let me tell you, I was given such an opportunity this morning. I wrote another book. It's just come out. Well, it came out last year in 2022. Because at the end of every bullying session, I give somebody an opportunity to do some healing and to apologize to somebody who they've caused pain for. And for 25 years, I have been listening to students make apologies to their fellow classmates. 10 years ago, a boy got up and said, "I want to apologize to my sibling." And everybody snickered. And he said, "Don't laugh. I share a room with a younger brother, and he always wants me to be with him and play with him and talk with him, and I've got studies and I've got tests to take." And I got so annoyed with him one night that I took out my pocket knife and I stabbed him in the arm. And we ran to the hospital and he got stitched up and I got severely punished. But I've never apologized to him. So now when I go to schools and I do bullying, after the apologize, I always say, "Is there anybody here that owes an apology to their sibling?" And all of these hands go up. And the only hands that don't go up are the children that say, "The only reason I didn't raise my hand is because I'm an only child." And Joe gave me the opportunity to bring copies of my books, which are invisible. Because when you write a book, the publisher does nothing to market the book. My book on sibling, bullying, betrayal, and bonding across the lifespan is invisible. And I was going to be able to maybe sell 2 books this morning, and that would have put me way ahead. And I forgot to bring them with me.
They can find them online, right? They can find your books online and order them that way?
Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon.
Hey, my question is, SuEllen, can you talk about the climate right now, particularly with trans youth and the laws that are going on? And what's your thought about the impact of all that?
I think that at the same time we all have the capacity for empathy, we also have the same capacity to disrespect differences. If somebody wants to do something with their life that is so different and it's against even our religious beliefs, we are causing pain for so much people. And when you read letters from parents who were shocked and stunned when their child came to them and said, "I want to be a different gender," but then those parents write letters to the editor and say, "I got over all the rejection, the resistance that I was feeling because I love my child." So I think somehow we are all going to have to go down a road that is very unfamiliar and make a commitment to honor and accept what people need to do to become whole. And we have to have conversations in kind ways that we can, maybe one person at a time, we can have them come a little closer to giving up a belief. And beliefs are so hard to give up. But it is a commitment that we have to make.
Hi, thank you so much. I heard you speak several years ago, and I still have my button that says, "Kindness is contagious."
Yeah.
Was that you?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, a lot of what you said brought up for me a recent article that I read, which said, when someone says something cruel or mean, nasty to you, and it's someone you care about, the proper response is, "Are you okay?" Recognizing that pain sometimes, just like kindness, it's contagious too.
Yes.
You know. So that was my comment.
What a wonderful way for us to, I don't know if we have to leave now because it's 10:30, but for us to take those 3 words and have them very close in our head. And when somebody is acting in a way that is very stressful, to turn to them and say, "Are you okay?" 3 words. Are you okay? What a gift. I came to give something to you, and I'm leaving with something that you have given to me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, SuEllen Fried, thank you. And everyone is invited to stay for the regular service, which starts right here at 10:45. And remember, next Sunday, the 9:30 Forum with Jane Clementi will lead off an important weekend with performances of the Tyler Suite Sunday morning and Monday evening here May 7th and May 8th. And all the details are online at allsoulskc.org. Again, SuEllen, thank you again so much.